Welcome to Sociology Analytica. This is Pooja Prasanna, your sociology faculty. So I'm going to discuss the next question on tribes, and that is discuss the implication of colonial policies of assimilation and isolation of tribes. This is for a 15-marker question. This is also a pretty simple question. So I'll tell you one thing on tribes. The question will be pretty much simple. It will be more or less straightforward question. Only thing is they'll little bit ask here and there, but the crux of the question, the crux of the content will be almost same. Okay. So yeah, let's discuss with this question. So implication, so they're telling that what are the implications, like how did assimilation and isolation policies of tribe, how did this policies affected tribe, or how did it impacted tribes. So this is what the question is. Okay, so what I'm doing is, so I'm, you must be knowing that the colonial policies of assimilation and isolation of tribes can be divided into three sections. That is, one is administrative segregation, next is proactive forest policy, the third is reformist approach. So these are the three different, it can be divided into three different sections. So which actually which talks about the colonial policies of assimilation and isolation. Okay. So what you have to do is, though they have asked the question of implication, they have asked about implication. Don't directly start about how it impacted tribes. Don't do that. What you have to do is first write about this colonial policies one by one, and then write what is the implication. This is how you should go with the answer. Okay. So first write about these three. I mean, you can divide into three different sections. First, administrative segregation. So under that administrative segregation, what you have to do is, where and all they have tried to segregate the people. Segregate people here is what? Segregate tribes from the mainstream. Okay, segregate here is not tribes themselves, basically tribes from the mainstream. Okay, so first and foremost is Government of India Act 1870. So this is the first and foremost act where they have tried to separate, they have tried to give a separate identity for the tribes. Okay, in this they have tried to give a separate identity for the tribes. They say that tribes are not similar as that of the other castefold people. Okay, and they should be kept separate. So this is the first act where they have tried to give a separate identity or segregate tribes from the caste people. Next is they established Scheduled District Act. So in this Scheduled District Act, they have established tribal tracts, like the way we have elephant tracts, tiger tracts, etc., etc. Same way, tribal tracts. Tribal tracts is basically where actually the tribes stay. So other mainstream people cannot go and do any of their economical activity. Okay, no economical activity will be, is allowed for the mainstream other caste people. Next is excluded and modified excluded areas. So basically, again, with a more tight policies, more strict rules. So they have made excluded and modified excluded areas. This is exclusively for tribes. Okay, this is exclusive for tribes. And then the anthropologist, socio-anthropologist or anthropologist, that is Verrier Elwin actually talks about or gives one more concept, that is tribal national park. This was only a suggestion, it could never come into the picture. The way we have Tiger National Park or any other national park we have, isn't it? So for example, why Elephant National Park or Tribal National Park is that? In order to safeguard that particular species, isn't it? Any species national park is to safeguard that. So Verrier Elwin also believed that because of too much of commercialization and encroachment, tribes were losing their own identity. So in backdrop of this, Verrier Elwin will say that we need to come up with a tribal national park, but then Britishers never actually came up with this plan. Okay, so this is about administrative segregation. Next is proactive forest policy. Under this, again, you have to mention some of the acts. So in Forest Act 1865, they took away the traditional forest rights. Traditional forest right, like collecting the bamboos, collecting the honey, etc., etc. So these were basically the forest right. Because forests belonged to the tribes, they could roam wherever they wanted to roam. Now after this, they could not roam anywhere where they wanted to roam. Even if they have to roam somewhere, they have to take permission from the Britishers. Next, Forest Act 1878. In this, forest was declared as state property. Okay, forest was declared as state property. That means what? So without the permission of Britishers, the tribes cannot do anything. So that means in order to collect something, let's say in order to collect honey, they have to pay tax to Britishers in order to just to collect the honey. Or let's say they have to live in a particular region, in that particular area. tribal area, in just to even reside there, they have to give tax to the Britishers. Okay, in the same act, they also started this reserved and protected forest. So this is basically, with extra rules and regulations in order to make sure that the tribes will not come in contact with a tribe, with a caste people. Next is grazing of cattle and the collection of wood. After this, that actually became illegal. That is, in order to even graze, your cattle, the cattle grazing, you should take permission from the Britishers. Finally, exploitation, commercial exploitation of forests. So basically what happened, so Britishers started realizing that all the resources are actually in forest. Not just the Britishers, this also gave an idea to the other Indian zamindars also. Okay, that okay, if we exploit the forest has more resources, and if we exploit that, we will be getting more money in return. And because of this, for the first time, we could see the entering of middleman into the forest area. And the next policy is reformist approach. So in this reformist approach, the British took this white man's burden. What is white man's burden? Rudyard Kipling gave the concept of white man's burden, isn't it? It is basically the burden of a white man in order to in order to change or reform these inferior beings. Who are inferior beings? Anyone who is not white, basically they were inferior being, or any other racial group of people were considered to be inferior being, and it is responsibility of a white man to change them or to reform them. So in order that, because of that, they took a redemptive role. Okay, they took a redemptory role. That is, what is redemptory role? That is basically to reform people or uplifting the fallen people. Here fallen people is all the racial or the colonialized people. Fine. And in order to uplift them, what did they do? They sent the Christian missionaries on a massive scale, so that these people will be reformed. Along with that, they'll also be converted into the Christian fold. So these are the policies. These are the set of policies with respect to tribes, that is assimilation and isolations of tribes. Okay, now after writing this, you have to write about the implication. Okay, what are the implications? First and foremost is tea and coffee plantation bonded labor. So as they made because of separation, and they felt that this tribal land has more resources, and it was the tribal lands more or less where it was surrounded in the hilly region, and hills were suitable for the coffee and tea plantation. So what happened? So whosoever were the tribes of that particular land, they were converted as the bonded labor. Next, railways broke the historical isolation. So basically, tribes were always, isolated, always, for a very long time period, they were always isolated from the caste fold. And because of the railways, so railways entered in these, isolated place, which kind of broke their isolation. Okay. And this is not just, the ecological isolation, it is also psychologically also they were disturbed because of this. Why? Because let's assume that, the railway line has gone through a particular place where, let's assume that bamboo was grown. Okay, let's simply assume that where bamboo was grown. And maybe for some tribes, this bamboo might be considered as a god. They might consider this as a totem. Okay, so because of the railway lanes, no, they just did not destroy the ecology. They also destroyed their god. Okay, so this isolation, the breakage of historical isolation because of railways broke from environment per se, also from the psychological per se. Next is mining and construction. In most of the places, not just in the tribal area, but in the other peripheral regions also, because of this high mining and construction, so the tribes were actually reduced to just a casual low paid workers. Next, because of the ecological imperialism, okay, when no more, as I said here, there was too much of forest policies, isn't it? Forest was considered as state property, reserved and forest protected rights, etc., was there. So because of all these things, they could not go for hunting and gathering. They could not just directly go and kill. Okay, they could not just directly go hunt the animal. Okay, so this actually forced them from giving up on hunting and gathering occupation, and they were forced to take up the commercial occupation, commercial agriculture. Here they did not had their own land. What happened in when they shifted to commercial agriculture, they just became a low paid casual worker, the casual agricultural workers. Okay, next is some of the tribes. Okay, some of the tribes were also considered as criminal tribes under what? Criminal Tribe Act 1871. Many of the tribes were considered as criminals. Okay, And next is, so because of, as I said here, because of the Christian missionaries and upliftment of the fallen, what happened? They started converting these, converting them to the other mainstream religion, and because of that, many of them gave up on their animistic religion, and along with that, they also gave up on their culture. So to a greater extent, because of the British policies and programs, tribes lost their livelihood, lost their mode of production, and not just that, they also lost their culture. Okay, so these are some of the implications of tribal policies by Britishers. Okay, is there, if there is any doubt further, please drop your queries in the comment section. Thank you so much.